on the Energy Commission about solar power on Greenbelt properties. So I just wanted to, Remy, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about, I think you've talked to Missy about this and what the plans are for us to engage with members of the Energy Commission and your thoughts about some of the, I think there's some misunderstanding about the Greenbelt program and from members of the Energy Commission and what we can do and what we can't do.
Sure. Yeah, so I have talked with Missy Stultz, who oversees the Office of Sustainability and Innovations at the city, about the Greenbelt program in general. Obviously, we have a partnership with the office toward measuring carbon sequestration capacity of Greenbelt properties. So we're trying to link up best we can with our program outcomes and their program efforts. And so this discussion, there's overlap obviously in that office and the Energy Commission and the citywide interest in solar and renewable energy. And I think there's just some basic misunderstandings about what our program achieves and what legal interests we do have in the properties that we can serve. I think some people misunderstand our interest, our legal interest in encumbering development rights and preserving these properties for actually having the legal right to do things on the property other than enforce those restrictions. And there may be, misconceptions that we actually maybe own some of these properties outright and we can do what we want with them. So it's easy to get confused. Certainly, there's a lot of moving parts of land conservation and each agreement is unique. But on top of it, the state of Michigan did issue new guidance on their temporary conservation program called PA 116 that does allow for commercial solar on PA 116 properties. So I'm sure that confused things even more, given that PA 116 is a term agreement with the landowner. So they guarantee the preservation of their property in exchange for a tax credit for a certain period of time. It is not perpetual like conservation easements, which we secure. It is term-based. So much like if a landowner who has enrolled in PA 116 wants to seek developing their property and violating the terms of the agreement they have in place with the state, they owe the tax savings that they've earned over the years in exchange for getting out of that agreement. So now landowners are eligible to have commercial solar on PA 116 properties, but that is very different from what we do and what the county does and our other partners at the township and nonprofit conservancy level. So our conservation easements allow for renewable energy or on-farm energy production, so long as it is limited to the intended purpose of powering the residential or farm infrastructure on the property. And if there is excess generation of power, it can be sold back to the grid. But again, the initial and the sole purpose of the energy production has to be for the personal use on the farm. So again, not conducive with widespread or large-scale commercial or community solar needs being explored either by the city or private entities surrounding the city.
Thanks, Remy.
Is this an okay time to ask a clarification question on that?
Yes.
Sure.
So one is when you say for personal uses, are those solar panels still within the area not under easement, or would they be within the easement land?
If they're outside of the easement area, then we have no say in the matter. So it could be there, it could be sited there. So we operate with two primary reserved rights. We either have a property that we're conserving and the landowner has reserved a certain amount of land out of the agreement and we are not encumbering that portion and they are free and clear to do whatever they want with that piece. Or they can include that piece, but then we partially encumber it with what's called a building envelope. And the solar, the on-farm energy production is limited in the easement terms to the building envelope area, wherever that is.
That's what I meant, within the building envelope. My other question is just generally, as we are thinking ahead on this, from a farmer's perspective, how the economic incentives differ if we include both tax benefits and possible leasing rights, right? They're getting paid for leasing land for solar, how that compares to the benefits of selling development rights? Like, is that something we need to be concerned about in terms of landowner outreach or things like that?
Yeah, we've always existed in a competitive market for what we do. Now the letters being sent may be about solar, commercial solar prospecting from some private companies, whereas it could have just been a knock at the door from someone who wants to buy it for housing development or still for that purpose. So we operate in that market. What's important is, I'm not well versed in the inner workings of these private companies, but much like our work or much like housing developers, there are properties that make sense and there are properties that don't. Whereas a solar company may send out initial letters of interest to, a couple hundred farmland owners in the surrounding Washtenaw County area. Which ones are adjacent to the energy storage or transfer capacity that they need along energy corridors, within proximity to not lose out on the energy loss over that transfer distance. It's actually it seems like it would be a relatively select amount of farms. And so, just like with housing, those will come, that option is presented to a landowner, and then the others that are not going to be eligible for that or not competitive candidates may look to our program, and we can build those strategic blocks of viable, productive farmland away from some of those pressures to keep those ag communities intact where we can. Did that answer all of it?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Are there other questions?
I might just add, I did consult with a customer of mine, a previous customer of mine, who had been approached by a solar company who wanted to buy a substantial part of his land, around 500 acres. They want to buy it outright. They don't want, this company anyway, did not want to lease. They wanted to buy the land outright. And they did put an option on that many acres, but they ended up only taking 80. So I don't know all of the ramifications of that. I can tell you that the offer that they made to him was very substantial.
I just think this is something that, especially with what Roseanne just said, something the Greenbelt Commission should keep a really close eye on as we move forward and think about how it might influence, what we perceive as the future of landowner options, and even this idea of agrivoltaics and how that fits into ideas of what agriculture looks like.
I think there's a important conversation that needs to be had by the city companies. What are the actual overlays on a map of areas that are viable for commercial solar to serve large populations? And where is our target? Where are our target parcels, and how much of that overlaps? And is there a sort of common understanding we can come to that says it looks like on the map this area is well suited for land conservation, sustained, and then here are the parcels that maybe shouldn't be considered by a program like the Greenbelt or the county's conservation program because it could undermine future efforts to transition toward renewable energy. Those are things that we've been lacking in that map and that overlay, but we're certainly headed in that direction. And I want to have that conversation with the Office of Sustainability and all their contacts as well.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe our options for supporting this project at the moment are a little limited, but it's certainly something that I think we should keep in mind and see if we can be strategic about supporting in the future, and, you know, purchasing in a more strategic way might be something to add to our criteria of things to review in the future. Kind of as you mentioned.
Right.
Have there been any, projects where we know the landowner wanted to split somehow this way? Or is there a way to partner in that way if we know that they want to put a conservation easement on part, but do solar on the other?
No,
Yeah,
I'm
I-
a
We
little,
want to be competing with these.
I'm a little
integrated-
confused on some of these projects. We just put we just put 36 panels in on our farm, but we were limited by DTE. It had to be around 100% of our usage. We had to provide 12 months of usage, and it couldn't be much more than that. So I don't really understand the difference between a private individual putting a solar installation on their farm and these large solar farms. Obviously, they work on a different kind of criteria. I don't really understand that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I understand it very well either, but we're talking megawatts of energy sold back to the grid. I'm aware of prospecting letters going out to landowners in Washtenaw County for lease agreements. So different than what you mentioned, Roseanne. I've only seen it offering rates that are extremely high and enticing, and certainly would grab a landowner's attention and warrant a call further for more information. But I'm aware of a bundle of 6 landowners all over the place that got the same letter, and it doesn't mean they all got it. So there are people pushing this, but I don't know enough about how the few that are on a commercial scale selling large sums of energy back to the grid, how those are selected, what the process is. But I do know it starts at a fairly wide pool and it narrows down to 2 or 3, actionable sites. And it's a pretty rigorous process. And we would have to invite an untapped partner in the solar business to come and talk to us about how that all works. I don't know if Harvest Solar out of Jackson is the right partner. It appears that they focus more on residential use and non-commercial, but they very well might. It might be worth reaching out to them to find out.
Not that this is a solution for everything, but I would suggest that maybe this is a student internship or master's project that we ask to look into this more deeply, just because it would be good to be ahead of the game and not be caught off guard with what various goals we're trying to do here. And sometimes they're going to be in conflict, sometimes they're not. And where can we take advantage of the fact that this is happening and make sure that both the Greenbelt goals are maintained, but also the renewable energy goals. And it's more complex than it seems on surface.
Yeah, there are going to continually be new markets that the landowners we have in our portfolio will want to ask about participating in. For instance, carbon markets right now will be something that I expect we'll get calls on, and many of our partners will get calls on as that market emerges, and if a carbon bank is established at a federal level. But I have heard from landowners that we work with asking if commercial solar is an option on their property. So there is interest, but the conservation easement clearly restricts it. So that will be tillable ground. And I understand agrivoltaics and raised elevated solar systems, but for now, that's mostly just, at best, there would be an interesting pilot project in Washtenaw County for that as a demonstration site, but we're quite far away from that being a norm. based on my understanding of it. But good to get ahead, like you said, yes, worth an internship, or just maybe Missy has some staff capacity in her office to allocate some of an FTE toward digging into this a little bit more. Or she already is.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, so the next step are, Rebby and I are going to talk to members of the Energy Commission and possibly get on one of their meeting agendas to talk about this further with them and maybe clear up a little bit about the misconceptions about what we can do, what we can't do. And yeah, I really like this suggestion of a master's student project. So thanks for mentioning that, Sheila. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is budget overview. Remy.
Yeah. So I wanted to take a moment to look at our budget together. Often when we approve projects, Robert asks, do we have the money? And then I say yes, and he says, good, we're solvent. And that's always correct. So thank you for always prompting that thought, Robert. And so here we are. These are all of the projects that have been approved by City Council that are in process currently. So that obviously a handful of city-led projects, and then a handful of partner-led projects, nearing 1,000 acres, nearing a total value of the acquired interest, not the actual property value, but easement or fee value, depending on the project, of over 8.3 million. And we have just shy of 2.6 million approved by council. Our fund balance as of December 31st, this is updated quarterly. So I will make this a point to be updating you at least quarterly on this as we meet. Our last quarterly balance was 6.3 million. So that leaves us with an unrestricted amount of 3.7. However, every project has its due diligence costs. We budget a flat 27.5 for every project that we are the lead on. And for every project where we will hold a conservation easement, we include a $23,000+ endowment for future legal enforcement and monitoring costs in the future, since these agreements are perpetual. The items you don't see on this list are all projects that you have considered in closed session, and the anticipated amount that the Greenbelt would contribute to those projects, totaling 3.1 or more. So leaving us, after all that due diligence, endowment, and commitments and pipeline of projects is accounted for, we're fairly low. But that's okay. It's not a bad thing. I can tell you that Washtenaw County's program is comfortable operating at a 2-year revenue oversubscription for them. So because these projects take anywhere from 12 to 36 months, depending on complexity, close from the time of application to the time of closing, it is okay to add commitments knowing that they will close in a future fiscal year when additional revenue will hit the books. But it would probably be unwise to commit further out than 2 years. So given that our annual revenue is around $1 million, that would mean we could go in the red up to or down to $2 million and not be overstretching ourselves. Whether or not staff can keep up with that volume of projects is a different thing. That's a whole other calculus. And this pipeline of approved projects, and then the pipeline of projects in closed session keep staff capacity well utilized at this point. So I don't know if going 2 million oversubscription would be advisable for what is achievable for managing projects, but it's certainly allowable if a special project comes along. As you can see that we have great leverage. We've been doing very well, some of these projects more than others, but all in all, we're averaging 64%. For this latest bundle, I think the program average as a whole is now hovering around 52%. So even our latest work is improving upon the average over the last 17 years that we've managed to put together. So yeah, just wanted to put this up here and take any questions if you have them. And that's it.
I just want to thank you, Remy, for putting this together in such a clear, easy to understand way. I know it's a question that I've had since I joined the commission regarding, how much money do we have on hand, and, can we say yes to compelling potential projects?
Absolutely, happy to do it. We needed to, and thank you and Robert and others who have mentioned it over the last 2.5 years that I've been here. When we came in, we did not have this many projects. It is worth noting that we're double, likely triple the number of projects and workflow that we've done in prior years. And so, either an uptick in interests from landowners, prices are getting more competitive, or just that's the nature of it right now. More people find out about these programs all the time, and it takes years for some of these to finally come to an application, even though they've known about the program for a long time. So for what all those reasons and all, some or all of them, we're at a very robust pipeline of projects that requires us to do this more careful budgeting at this point.
I just want to say congratulations too. I think it's such a testament to you that instead of just going for the low-hanging fruit or just going for a few large ticket items, we have this spread both geographically and number of farmers involved that takes more effort because you've got more landowners, but it seems to be using the money that we have more effectively.
I agree with that. Thank you. Yeah, that's a great assessment of the spread we have here, and the closed session items are very similar as well. And after tonight, maybe some of those will be on this above the line board where we can look at them more clearly after they've gone through council. But we're also working really. Just so you all know, the city attorney's office just did a wonderful job working collaboratively with me to update our template conservation easement to really take some of the latest and greatest language and best practices and make sure that those are all in there and accounted for. And because we have those templates put in place now, both federal and non-federally funded easement templates, we're hoping that we're going to be able to churn through some of these projects faster than 36 months, which has been an unfortunate ballpark that we've used in the past with landowners. I'll still continue to use that for any of the landowners coming in the pipeline now, because we have so much we need to clear out before we can actually attend to that project. But in general, some of these federally funded or non-federally funded projects might be able to clear out in 18 months, whereas it used to be 24 months, or 12 months where it used to be 18. So I'm confident we're going to be keeping a better pace about all this now that we've got some streamlined forms in place.
Any questions? I just want to add that the property there right in the middle, to add congratulations to Remy and putting through the largest parcel in the Greenbelt history, and I'm very excited about that. It's just amazing and a testament to your work, and Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. We'll
Okay.
celebrate when it closes.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Moving on to next agenda items. And Remy, I think the master's student project is coming to a close soon. I'm not sure when they're going to be presenting, perhaps May meeting.
Yeah, May. They could probably make an appearance in June if we really ask it of them. I don't know if they'll be ready in April, Sheila.
Oh, so absolutely. There are two ways we could do this, or there's something, well, they will be finished April 20th. So they could give a presentation within a GAC session. I think that would make sense. But I also wanted to point out that they are presenting for the Stewardship Network in a webcast this coming next Wednesday. And I guess I can't post in chat or anything here, but I can share that in an email. And of course, it's publicly available for anybody who would want to join it. If you just go to the Stewardship Network and look at their webcasts, they are giving a talk on quantifying carbon storage with remote sensing techniques on Wednesday, March 10th from 12 to 1. And so that's an hour-long webcast that's going to go into a lot more technical detail about the tools that they use to develop the model that they've been working with Remy. But do we want them to come in to a GAC session and do like a 10-minute overview of the project? What do you think, Remy?
I think that'd be great.
And Jennifer, good. Okay, so why don't we talk about, I guess I would prefer that they do it if possible for our agenda in the April session, not pushing it into the May session, just because we like to have them wrapped up by graduation, sort of before the capstone is done April 20th technically, and I don't really want to ask much of them after that in case they're off to other jobs and things.
Since it's the first Thursday in April, I wouldn't anticipate that they'd be able to share a draft report ahead of time to be able to peruse and ask questions. So we'll just need a
Actually, that's a good point. If you want to look at the report first, then we could go to the May. Let me just check in with them to make sure that they're not, they might be taking on a full-time job right away or something like that. So if we're looking at May 6th, you could definitely have a report before then. But if we're looking at April, it would be April 1st, actually. Then no, there would not be a draft report ready for review then.
Yeah, if they can do May,
Okay.
we're anticipating that the RCPP awards would be announced in April.
Okay.
So, but not at the first meeting in April. So it might be a nice open session focused meeting where we have several open session agenda items to discuss instead of, But if they can only do April, that's fine.
I'll ask about May 6th and make sure that we get you a final report to read beforehand. And that webcast is open for anyone who wants to learn a whole lot about remote sensing and GIS.
They're using a supercomputer. I just keep going back to that. It's just mind-boggling as that is. Something we did required a supercomputer, and that's really cool.
Any other next agenda items that people have suggestions to add? Okay. The next item on the agenda is closed session to discuss land acquisition. And we typically take a roll call to go into closed session. So to vote on that. So Commissioner Bloomer?
Yes.
Commissioner Boggs?
Yes.
Commissioner Fike, yes. Commissioner Gordon?
Yes.
Commissioner Councilperson Grand?
Okay, yes.
Commissioner Lillard? Commissioner Riggs?
Yes.
And Commissioner Schuler?
Yes.
Okay, we have a quorum to go into closed session. I'll see you all shortly. we have some motions from members, starting with, I think, Elizabeth.
Yes, that is right. So I have a motion. I'd like to make a motion regarding the properties we just discussed. So make the motion to recommend city participation with Scioto Township and Washtenaw County Parks and Recreation Commission in the fee acquisition of property identified in application ID 2020-11 and approval of the contribution of funds not to exceed $31,667 from the open space and parkland preservation millage.
Is there support?
Support.
Roseanne, okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion is carried. And is there another motion to be made? Elizabeth Lillard.
Indeed, have another motion. I like to make a motion to recommend city participation with Scioto Township and Washtenaw County Parks and Recreation Commission in the fee acquisition of property identified in application ID number 2020-14 and approval of the contribution of funds not to exceed $44,167 from the open space and parkland preservation millage.
There's support?
Support.
I think that was Elizabeth Riggs is who I'm going to call that one. Nope. Okay.
It was Schuler and Gordon.
Okay. We'll go with Sheila Schuler. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion is carried. Okay. Next up, there's another one. Can't remember what's next. Jason.
I think that's me. Motion to recommend city participation with Scioto Township in the acquisition of a conservation easement on the property identified in application ID 2020-09 and approval of the contribution of funds not to exceed $244,000 from the open space and parkland preservation millage.
Is there support?
Support.
Thanks, Robert. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion is carried. And I think, who's up next? Rose.
I have a motion
Oh, Elizabeth, thank you.
to recommend the purchase of development rights on application ID 2020-08 in Superior Township, approve a participation agreement with Washtenaw County Parks and Recreation, and appropriate funds not to exceed $288,867 from the open space and parkland preservation millage proceeds.
Is there support?
Support.
Thanks, Jason. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion is carried. I think next up we have Robert.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend the purchase of development rights on application ID 2020-01 in Superior Township. Approve a participation agreement with Washtenaw County Parks and Recreation and appropriate funds not to exceed $291,367 from the open space and parkland preservation millage proceeds.
Is there support?
Support.
Thanks, Roseanne. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? That motion is carried. Okay, and I think we have a last motion.
I have a motion to confirm per chapter 42, section 366 of the city code that the parcel identified in application 2017-04 is not under consideration by the Greenbelt Advisory Commission, and to provide written confirmation of this to the Parks Advisory Commission.
There's support for that motion.
Support.
Thanks, Elizabeth Riggs. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? That motion is carried unanimously. Okay, I think that's all of the motions from the closed session. Moving on to the agenda, public commentary. I don't believe there is any public waiting to speak to us. All right, next up is report from commission committees. I'd like to report on the executive committee. We had a meeting. Actually, we've had 2 members join the executive committee. Elizabeth Riggs and Jason Boggs have joined the executive committee. So they attended their first meeting last week, and we discussed the upcoming agenda, talked about some of the current projects, including some of the closed session projects, and trying to think what else. I did have the meeting minutes open.
I also the topic that we discussed earlier in the agenda about the solar.
Yes. Anything else to add from that meeting, Jason? All right. And then there were no meetings from the communications committee or the scoring committee. And that's a wrap. All those in favor want to adjourn the meeting, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Good to see you all.
You too.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
everybody. Stay
Great.
safe. and
Well
well.
done, Jen and Remy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.